twice a year. I live in Dubai myself and been involved with IIMS since 2006 when I was with my previous employer, Erickson & Richards, from where I learned my surveying skills. And I always take this opportunity to thank my mentor, Capt Zarir Irani, whom I have learned my surveying from. I still have him as my mentor. I have been fortunate enough to run and operate Constellation Marine Services from 3 locations in the UAE, have an office in Singapore, and our headquarters are in London, where the board of directors reside. In 2007, when we initiated Constellation Marine, we signed up as corporate members, and I was inducted as an in-country rep for the institute. Eventually was invited on the board and was made the regional director for the Middle East. And 3 years ago, I was selected as the deputy vice president of the institute, and currently I'm serving as the vice president. Why IIMS? It's simply because what Mike addressed earlier as to who is a marine surveyor. I think there are a combination of things. One is training. So I have done the diploma which the institute has. I must say it is one of the finest pieces of education I've had, having done my MBA, having done my master's, but this was absolute specific spearhead towards what I earn my living from today. Along with that, the books, that's absolutely required. I've just purchased some more today. So even though I am speaking on marine warranty today, I still think there is so much out there which I have yet to learn and know from different perspectives, from different writers. Putting this presentation together itself was a learning opportunity for me. And I thank Mike to invite me to speak on behalf of the Institute. That's that about what I have to say about where I come from and what I do. Getting on with our presentation. It's not talking. Mike, it's not. So, putting this presentation together about warranty surveying is, I've seen there being a huge gap between what people understand warranty to be. I mean, we all have watches, equipment, things that we have, electronics that we use in our day-to-day life. All of those come with a warranty. I mean, if I dip my watch in a hot cup of tea and go running to the manufacturer, asking him to replace it because it's not working anymore, he's going to show me the finger and tell me to bugger off because I've done something that a reasonable user of an electronic equipment wouldn't do, or drop it, or have it mess around with my small kid, or do whatever it is that shouldn't be done. Exactly the same principle applies with project cargo or something that we are called out for. Due diligence. What should a reasonable operator, freight forwarder, project cargo moving company do to have the project run without an incident? As long as reasonable due diligence has been taken and all the steps have been in place, that project cargo or that particular piece of equipment would reach its destination, or the project would be executed to its conclusion without an incident. And that's really what we're there to look at, report if we see something unreasonable. In other words, if somebody is about to dip the watch in hot tea, which is say, stop, don't do that. If you do it, it'll get damaged and you won't get paid for a replacement. So that's all that a warranty surveyor does when he's out at sea. Oh, or at site. I keep saying at sea. So a brief overview of what we're looking at doing. I'm going to introduce you part of what I just said with a small story as well from Texas. scope of the survey, marine surveying, warranty surveying, operations, the purpose of it, the code of practice, the process, and probably the last 1/3 of my time is going to be spent on communications, because it's not about skills as much as it is about communications when you're out there as a warranty surveyor. Not necessarily for you to communicate only, but to understand others communicating with each other and to be there to hear and realize that communication. So that's going to be my stress today, because after doing a little bit of research, I realized that if we fail in our communication, the reception and deliverance of communication, we would be not as good a warranty surveyor as we ought to be. Now, to introduce, I've just picked on one of the aspects, project cargo. So project cargoes, what would a marine surveyor be needed for and why so? A quick introduction, I'm sure everybody knows, but just get the momentum going. It is anything that is a critical item. A critical item or a critical piece is defined differently by different underwriters. Some say 50 tons or more. Some say a valuable cargo of, let's say, $1 million or $500,000 or more. Some say this is the only boat I have and I've spent all my life's earning. I want to make sure that it reaches from here to Maldives in good shape. So I want somebody to have a look at it and make sure it's lashed, secured, and carried reasonably well. So what you are called out for representation as a warranty differs with different underwriters, principals, owners of pieces of project or yachts or whatever it is that it is. The most important aspect of that is that the warranty survey clause, which is practically in each and every cover incorporated, has a requirement of an independent marine warranty surveyor to be appointed. I mean, most project cargoes today have super cargoes flying in and out to make sure that there are incident-free movements of this expensive cargo. However, in spite of that professional being there and having exactly the same purpose that you have, there is still a need for the underwriter to appoint an independent, not because they want to double up, it's because they want an independent view, because there are times when the superintendent or the supercargo has commercial pressures. He wants to roll out the ship in a hurry. He wants to finish the discharge at a certain time. There are lake cans at the other end to be met. So there have been enough evidences where there has been compromise seen done by the superintendent who flies in. So here's an independent who is not bothered with all of that. There is a one-point agenda to make sure that every tick in the box is there, every aspect is looked at, and every procedure is being followed to standards. So the fundamental objective is to endeavor that the risks associated with these movements or this operation is minimized. It's never eliminated. There are times when you have to take a certain amount of risks. It is risky anyways to move a large 500 or 1,000-ton unit from one end of the world to another. You can mitigate that risk by breaking it down and rewelding it at destination itself, and that's mitigate. There are times when that's not necessarily how the receiver wants it done for various reasons. For that matter, Jebel Ali port has its gantry standing up tall when they're coming down from their manufacturers, and they come down all the way from the South China Sea into the Middle East, and they are lashed standing tall on the decks of a specialized vessel. At least we know that we were involved in Terminal 3 when this was discharged, and it was quite a sight to see gantry cranes standing up on the backs of ships and on decks of ships and coming down. So there are standards and acceptable levels of risks are what the underwriters want the marine surveyor to bring it down to, and that is left to the warranty surveyor to decide using his expertise. And that's why it's very important. I'll come down later as to why it is so important to send the right man for the right job. So coming to the next aspect of this presentation is the scope. Let's start with the principles, and this includes examination and evaluation that is carried out before the first unit is moved. The involvement could be threefolds. I'm not going to talk about the latter two, but there could be an advisor if there are really out of gauge cargo huge units. There would be a need for an advisor. There would be a verification body in place. But we're talking typically of the first role that an independent would play, and that would be that of the marine warranty surveyor, more so of somebody who will be on site at the time of moving the cargo as such. Here's a little picture of an accommodation of a rig being moved on the back of a semi-sub, being assisted by a lead tug. Now you would question the need for the lead tug to be there when you have propulsion. I'm assuming here that the semi-sub which is following the tug would have its own propulsion, but would there be a necessity for a tug? Under the circumstances, whoever probably decided to have the extra expenditure probably has felt the need to have that there to probably reduce the risk. Probably there is a need for that tug to mitigate. Maybe it was weather risks or probably tricky maneuvers during passage. We don't know. So marine warranty surveyor will start his job with reviewing the documentation that is presented. There will be somebody writing it. Under no circumstances will a warranty surveyor be asked to write any procedures. It will always be him verifying procedures. If he sees something that is abnormal or can be better noted, or there is not enough information, which is most likely wherever we have done verification, we always have put down additional checks at the time of reviewing, saying that these will be the milestones, these will be the checkpoints. We will stop, look, have a meeting, have toolbox meeting, which is always there is a need to make a little bit extra review of those aspects. So calculations, procedures, there will be manuals drawn up, there will be drawings sent to you. When you say calculations, it's not about taking a quick look at it and saying it's all right. It's about feeding those figures again in a certain, let's say, Lashcon program or some, friction and movement, load density calculations of the area where the cargo is going to be. So you got to put the calculations back in another or similar program to come up with your own answers of whether it is within the criteria or not. So it is a payday depending on the amount of calculations that you have to review, but you have to redo them to verify them, whether the answers are coming correct or not, which is something that is debatable. At least we like to say that we would like to do them all over again to see if the answers match. Certificates, vessels, crew competencies, we had a recent example of there being a certain port, where I wouldn't say which one, where the crane operators were sent in by the stevedores and said they've been working on in the port for the last 15 years. Each one had the experience statement, training certificates, everything. When we went for the toolbox meeting, one chat with them, asking them the relevant question of when was the last time they moved a 500-ton unit? They had no answers. I said, 200-ton unit, no answers. I said, 50-ton unit, said no answers. All they were doing for most of the time out there was discharging bulk cargo, maybe pipes, maybe boxes, maybe steel plates, etc., 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 which were really maximum 30, 35 tons, which normal Handymax crane would be lifting and moving. Tandem moves, never done before. This was a 400-ton unit, which was amongst the 4 critical items which were being discharged. We put our foot down, say, stop. We will be putting in a warranty. We will not have these operators on the cranes of this particular heavy lift vessel, because they've never done this kind of work before. Yes, they had the certification. Yes, they had the training, but the practical experience was limited to discharging just break bulk cargo. Our flag was upheld, and our intervention was appreciated. They signed up the ship's crew, who also had training certificates. They had operated their own cranes just the port before to get that unit on board. But because the stevedores had given them a competent package saying that we would be using our own people, they said, okay, we don't want the expensive option of having the ship's crew discharge this cargo. We'll go with the stevedores, they're cheaper. But they weren't incompetent according to us as warranty. I was myself there on site as a showstopper, or flagging, sorry, wrong words used, as flagging the aspect of there being a possible warranty breach. Everyone said we were unreasonable. The underwriters were laughing at all of them. They said, thank you for your intervention. It is honored. They wrote back to say, if you have these stevedores discharge this cargo and something goes wrong, there is a breach of warranty. The cover will not be, possibly, cover won't be in place if there is a claim. So here's a live example which happened a month and a half ago, I would say. So relevant reports, again, like I said, I've got 7 slides just on that. Getting on to preparations. Preparations are absolutely important, because without that you would be gasping for air. And on this, I would like to say the relationship between the project, the stakeholders of the project, and the warranty surveyors, much like marriage between husband and wife. It's all lovely in the beginning when you're courting, when you say, I do, and you're madly in love with each other. So that's what happens when a marine warranty surveyor comes aboard. Everybody says that they love him or her. And you reciprocate equally. If somebody shows you love, you give back the love. But I've been happily married for 19 years, and I think I'm madly in love with my wife as much as I was, so I would put a caveat there. But there are enough people who'd say that probably 19, 20 years later, or 19, 20 days later, or 19, 20 minutes later, after the first or second intervention or argument takes place, whether there should be a warranty or do this properly, toolbox meeting, can we talk a little bit more about that? And like every married couple argues, or has interventions, or has difference of opinion, to put it down in different ways, there is always that when a marine warranty surveyor is there versus the stakeholders. And when that happens, the arguments get bitter, louder. Sometimes there are faces off. Like in this case, we had to write to the underwriters immediately and say the crane operators are incompetent. We weren't very popular on site when that happened. There was a delay in discharge. Somebody had to pay somebody the extra hours that the vessel was idling. Tough, but it was needed. So a warranty surveyor, by the time he gets off, he is had definitely some bitter differences of opinion, invariably. If he hasn't, that's your cue of your own job not done well as marine warranty surveyor. If you take that as a thumb rule and say that you've not added value or reduced risks to some extent, you have actually just been an audience to the whole thing. There is no perfect operation that takes place. There's always a scope for improvement. There's always that little bit about some other project that is done better than this one that you witnessed as a marine warranty surveyor, and you should dig into that knowledge or ask your mentors or guardian angels to tell you what that little extra bit is, because as the project is going forward, you should be. So well suited for the task is extremely important. Giving you this example of a married couple, you will have arguments, you will have, but you got to learn to love each other, because you're there to stay. Some marriages break up, unfortunately, and some warranty surveyors get thrown out of the job, unfortunately. That has happened and will continue to happen. That's why communications are very important. To be a good diplomat is extremely important to stay on the job. At the same time, be giving that little value that is needed to finish it. Classification is important to understand equipment, man, material, everything is classified, trained, there are certificates in place. Safety of the operation is extremely important. When you look at it and say that, look, there's somebody not wearing a helmet or going in that cordoned off area or is standing under that unit, heavy lift. But my underwriter is not going to cover that guy and his health. He's been insured somewhere else, or whatever happens. But it's your job overall to basically, be ensuring that it's going up to safe standard. It may not be directly relevant, but you don't want somebody's hand crushed under your project cargo. Your project cargo might not have any damage as such, but you got to be looking out for any and every danger around. Declaration of operations is very important. Everybody who is supposed to be the key personnel is important to be identified. Each declaration has to have an activity vertical. I will operate the crane. That's my activity. I am going to be in charge of the trailers, the suitability of the trailers, the equipment, and its so every operation has its vertical, and there is a person in charge or a person who owns that particular procedure, and that vertical has to be identified so that we can address the aspect which is needs to be having an intervention only to that person. It's no point writing it to the whole world and including everybody, because that's over communication. That is as harmful as you under communicating certain aspects. Yeah. If you are unable to issue a declaration or an intervention, it sometimes happens when you are offshore. There is a video later on of a jacket being put together. You might not have internet range, you might not have phone ability. So it is important to have a line of communication. A warranty can be put in place as much as by putting a verbal notification in place, by having somebody witness saying that, Mr. Operator, you moving the crane too fast for this particular heavy cargo. And if there are two independents or somebody who is not stakeholder, not party to this, listening to that intervention, that's your warranty being in place, legally speaking. If the underwriter wants to pick it up and make it an issue following an incident with regards to that particular aspect of breach of warranty. So a warranty clause in a certificate, in a policy is a clause which says very clearly that the warranty will be specific and it has to be complied with as it is. I mean, if there is a warranty recommendation or if there is an intervention, it has to be literally in place. And usually it is an action-oriented intervention. It would require you to be doing this that way, or this one to have this qualification or this certificate of this equipment not being relevant. It has to be very specific and it has to be followed literally as it is. That is why when you are communicating, it has to be correct. Or then you issue a certificate, certificate of approval, which says, yes, everything is going as for it. We've done all the checks. It's okay to get on with loading that. I've got a small video just to give me a little break, glass of water, just to see if this wakes you guys up. There is a warranty surveyor somewhere in this lift. That unit is about to get lifted, and that's the tail that's lifting it, just to give you a perspective. I hope that's not the warranty surveyor. It's a signal man, I think.
So the counterbalance.
Yes, we got the calculation. Yes. The unit lifted. That's a few $1 million and 6 months gone out of the site straight away. Well, fortunately, it wasn't one of Constellation Marine's jobs, so I have no idea. It's video that's sent to me by a friend that thought it would be relevant to put some. Yes, yes. So just to let you know that the intervention of a marine warranty surveyor could have come as late as there, where he saw that crawler front wheels just lifting. Probably that's too late. Probably just between when it was there and then, he could have stood right next to the signal man and he could have said, start lowering it back. This is not looking good. It's not supposed to lift that fast, that high up. Even though the initial intervention of the calculations, the counterweights, everything was wrong on this, probably. But as a last stopping point, it could have been an intervention as late as then to avoid probably a few $1 million wiped off. So if that has given you some perspective of the importance of there being a need for a marine warranty surveyor, then I think it's only appropriate to tell you, after looking at that, the purpose of a marine warranty surveyor to be there. He would most likely have a good idea of the standards which are required for producing a claim. There would be enough experience behind a marine warranty surveyor or his company to understand what is needed to have appropriate standards. I mean, with that in mind, I would say, would a dynamic load test certificate be required for a crane which is over 4 years old? Usually it is a 5-year survey for a dynamic load test. A static one would be done annually with a prudent operator. Some of them do it biannually. So things like these, maybe the classification society of the carrier or the crane says the 5 years dynamic load test is fine with us, but if it's a critical item, if you see there being a bit of a negligent maintenance, you see some oil leaking out of the machinery room and you're doing a cursory glance on the crane when you're lifting, you'd probably say, yeah, you've done it it's 4 years since you've done it, but this crane is not looking good. I would like to have a dynamic test before it's being lifted, or get a show crane and do it, or whatever it is. So what I'm saying is it is extremely objective. It is on the site decision, but you will have to justify it because there will be enough people who would be pointing a finger at you and saying that you're being unreasonable as a loss prevention warranty surveyor. Looking at you, what loss prevention popped in my mind. But it is effectively what we do as warranty. We do loss prevention, really. And then there would be an agreement between parties. If there is a crane certificate which is sent to you, which has 4 years, you would say that, yes, we will accept it, but it will be subject to a crane inspection. We will have to look at the wires. We'll have to look at the certificate, maintenance, PMS history of the crane, and then take a decision on site whether we're okay with that 4.5-year-old dynamic load test that is done on it, and then get on with it. But it is important to communicate that again well in time. It's no point in saying, yeah, everything looks good, all certificates are in place, and then turn around and say, you know what, I don't think it's good enough. I mean, you might get away with it, but it's a difficult one. So being a good communicator is extremely important. Well, let's get on with the code of practice. With that in mind, the role that a surveyor, marine warranty surveyor plays in the whole life cycle of the project. He has to demonstrate competency, and that it is very important in the courting stages. That is the first introduction to when he comes in, to very importantly demonstrate that you have adequate experience on similar projects. You have to constantly educate the people and the stakeholders on site that you have done similar work. The last project I did was so and so, like I'm doing right now, trying to convince you all as stakeholders who are listening to us that we've done a project a month ago and this was the example. So you know that the experience that I am putting across behind these is relevant, active, on-site experience, merged with a little bit of theory that I'm demonstrating. So this aspect is extremely important, because if they don't respect you on site or don't know about you being on site, who understands the job and is a bit compromising, is a bit easygoing, there's got to be a lot of laughs and easygoing, because there is no point in being a sticky finger in the whole project. You'd be, again, you won't last the project, I can assure you. If the project is a few days or months into doing it, you'll be probably stuck out. So it's very important to have that understanding. Kickoff meetings are very important. There will be a lot of EPCs. They'll all have deadlines. They will all hate delays. And schedules will be provided ahead of time. So you have to understand that you have to read between the lines, and reputation of the operators, their background history, all this has to be done as a background study for you. It is extremely important. The critical shipment, like I said, is a definition which is different from different underwriters. You will be clearly asked, or you will be asking what the critical item criteria is. I was not too long ago in a kickoff meeting for a large project where we are signed up as warranty surveyors. It's going to go on until 2020. There are some 51 shipments, and I can tell you that there was a bit of a debate about the critical shipment criteria. What is a critical shipment? And the EPC contractors all had to shave their list down of critical items considerably after that meeting, and that was an extremely useful. There were people flying from at least 4 corners coming down on the job site, and it was extremely important as it's, like I said, it's a large project. It's going to go on for 3 years. So the process is very important, and the process may include a lot of machinery, equipment lists. There will be road transits. You will have to probably do a route survey before there will be a job site. It will be away from port. There will be barging routes. All this will have to be done as a study. On this particular kickoff meeting, we actually, after the meeting with various EPC contractors and the stakeholders, we actually drove up to the job site to see what it was, and there was no road. It was literally rubble that we were driven up, and shipment number 6 was already going to be underway with critical items. The first 5 were without critical items on it. So clearly, we had to be careful about a lot of things straight away, just by doing a quick drive up and down the job site, which was quite far away from the port as such, where the items would be landed. Review and approval of the transportation, the reputation and the equipment used by the transporter is extremely important. More often than not, they are subcontracting their transportation needs. If their trailers, which are presented, are busy somewhere else, they usually take on somewhere else. And more often than not, the trouble is there, because there is a little bit of a need of due diligence that is required. There's going to be a video about that. That photograph there is of an accommodation block being landed on a jacket which is piled. Got a video which will have a time lapse of the whole thing, so you understand, and that's where the communication challenges will be there. Copies of the Marine Warranty Survey report are to be going to the underwriters, brokers involved, clients. All these lines of communications will be defined. We'll talk more as we progress in this presentation. The quarterly recap of loss control expenses is generally done by the underwriters, usually paid by the stakeholders or the policyholder, but initially it is upheld by the underwriters. But there is a quarterly expense because every project has a budget for warranty. It is initiated right up front, and it needs to be controlled. If there are recommendations by the Marine Warranty Surveyor, they have not been complied with, then there has got to be a certain amount of flack to that, or a reaction to that. It may not have an incident attached to it. Let's say I put a warranty and say, you know what, we're going to continue discharging this unit even though we've lost daylight. There are enough heavy lift operators who have strict criteria of stopping work at sundowners. Sunset time marks it. Even though there is twilight, you can see the unit. They say stop operations at the time when the almanac says it's sunset. But they kind of carry on with that last unit being kept or lashed, and then if there is an incident, that becomes a breach of warranty. However, more often than not, you keep one eye shut and carry on. But if you send out a communication, sundowners, drop your tools, or don't start this unit being discharged because you will not finish it in the next 20 minutes when it's going to be sundowners. And if there is nothing going on and it goes, the unit gets discharged all right, but still you have flagged it, somebody has to answer to not reacting to a warranty survey communication which indicates a certain breach. At the end of it, there is always a certificate of approval that is issued before a lift, before a unit moves, before a unit is lashed out, and that marks the so-called approval. I'll play a little video. It's a little longish video. I'll skip in between once you get a little hang of it. A typical project like this would be done under the supervision of a marine warranty surveyor, invariably. But it's usually done on high seas. It's done under extremely tricky conditions, considering weather windows, and there is usually a lack of communication when a jacket is being piled into the ocean floor. So I'll play it so that you understand the gravity of it if you've not seen it or not experienced something and it's not playing. Yeah. So that's the legs that have come in that are going to go in the jacket on a barge. Thousands of photographs put together in a time lapse. So somebody who sat and compiled the whole thing together. These are two floating units. The crane barge is floating and the barge which has been picked up from is floating. So extremely tricky maneuver. It seemed like the crane barge is moving away, but actually the barge has just slipped out of the way. Four-minute video. I don't know if you have 4 minutes. That's the first pile going in, and they're going to be hammering the piles in, the welding the piles. Clearly not a job for one warranty surveyor on site. There's got to be 2 or 3 taking turns because around the clock operation there. That's a frame. That's a toolbox meeting which they just had. I'm surprised that's the heaviest unit and doing it in the night. I would probably do it in daylight, or I would at least put down some recommendations about it. So nothing broke, nothing fell. This was a seamless operation. But just to give you a bit of an idea of what, and it's edited. I think the video is much larger, but we made it do. So that's what a rig would eventually, and there are thousands of these. The trickier one, which is these days quite a trend, is decommissioning one of these, which will be sitting out there in position for probably 15, 20 years. And it's quite a, I've spoken recently at the first decommissioning conference, and there was enough worry, and there was always a language of extending life expectancy rather than, going 100% with decommissioning of it. So giving a little perspective of how difficult sometimes communication on a scenario like this would be, I would say the most important aspect of show stopping would be to withhold the certificate of approval, because each of these movements would have a certificate of approval once the checks are done, once the recommendations are met. There would always be an on-site quick certificate of approval. I've seen in Mike's book there is an example of the certificate of approval. I've not purposefully put down a picture of one of ours because there are as many versions of it. It could be as much as one line or an email going saying all okay to get on with. But that's important. If the assured fails to comply with recommendations made, then there is the option the underwriter has to not pay a claim or to put a very strict surveillance in place, because then it doesn't necessarily have to accumulate into a claim or something breaking, falling. If there is a recommendation and if it's not met, that's the first sign that the underwriters have that they're dealing with cowboys. And the recommendations keep on increasing gradually. Like the first argument you have with your wife after the first honeymoon is over, if you have slept over without resolving that, you bet your bottom dollar you're going to have many more of those in your relationship. Never go to sleep on an argument. Always, and it's not about putting a hard foot down and saying you must do with this and that, because it's very easy for a warranty surveyor to become a bully on site. The moment you see your first 2 or 3 recommendations being followed, you start getting carried away, and that's where the problems start happening, because they do it because they know that there are going to be dire consequences if they're not being followed. But so good communication, absolutely vital, and I can't emphasize on it being the most important aspect. If you have seen through a particular large project like the one we're talking about, we're doing one right now, we're already in our 2nd year on it. It's a large LNG exploration project. And I'll tell you, there are times when you will be, looked down upon for being the stickler in the whole project. But the way you handle egos on site, because somebody is going to have his hand smacked as a result of your recommendation, nobody's going to like that. So regular updates are important as a feed that comes to you. Sometimes you got to put your hand in their hands and mouths and get the information you want, but how you do it, everyone has a different style, but it's very important. You must have an authority at the underwriters whom you can contact 24/7. Now, that's something that you don't necessarily have very easily, but it's your job as a warranty surveyor to ask your principal. Most often it's going to be the underwriter who will appoint you as a warranty or list you or pick your name out of the panel that they have, that they should understand the need of being there 24/7. It's extremely important, because if you can't get in touch with your underwriters, your job might not be complete. Planning and timely communications are important. Like I said in the previous video, when the entire thing collapsed, it could have been as late as the trailer lifting the front end of its what do you call that? The rollers, yeah. Milestones, risks, milestones have to be identified, and this has to be done before you get on with it. In the last video, we saw lifting the jacket, piling, hammering down. These are all milestones because different people will be involved in different type. Welding, you got to do an NDT probably before the next pile is welded and hammered down. So all these are important milestones and checkpoints which you have to identify before. Certificates of approval will be issued timely. That's extremely important because that to a good contractor, he will not lift without having a sight of the certificate of approval. It's extremely important how you're going to communicate that. You might have a small email going out to everybody in a mailing list saying all checks done, warranty surveyor can use this as your certificate of approval. It could be as basic and simple as that, but it needs to be there. Yes. This last paragraph, you will be having insufficient information always. There will always be a need for you, whenever you're given the first document review to be done, you will always inevitably have incomplete information. And why is that? It's not because they don't want to give it to you. It's because it comes from so many sources and it's all compiled in one place, and the project head probably sends it all out to the underwriter and underwriter sends it to you. There might be some pieces of information which might not be available already. Like, for example, the ballast calculation that comes on, you don't know what the bunkers are going to be when the vessel comes in. They might have sent you one in anticipation, but might be different. Like the one we're doing right now, vessel is actually arriving today in port, and one of our surveyors, Ragnar, is out there. And I'll tell you that the vessel was held up at the Suez Canal because of breakdown of some machinery. So situations have changed. She's got delayed, she's had other things, maybe some things need to be checked, maybe one machinery is neglected, broken down. Does that mean that her cranes need to be had a closer look? We don't know. They're doing it at the moment as we speak. So marine warranty surveyor has to satisfy himself, and he has to have his own checklists. He has to have a time log of his own, and he has to have a good idea of the codes of practice. And these codes of practice vary with different operators, with different people. Sometimes you pick on the operator's code of practice and look at it and say they're all right. But if they're not matched or the lifting criteria is not followed, there is a breach of warranty. But in general, thumb rule is best industry practice has to be followed with the location inside, the equipment. There was an incident where we had the movement of the cargo, and it was the fasting month. Like I said, a month and a half ago, the same project where the crane operators were not approved by us. The unit was swung out and it was kept suspended because the trailer driver got probably bored death to his mind, because one of these movements could take easily an hour or 2 hours. The trailer driver was just sitting there brainlessly doing nothing. So he had gone off somewhere and he found a corner and probably fell asleep. I don't know. But there was no trailer operator, and the unit is moved out and it's just suspended there. We finally had to move the unit ahead and had to rest it down on the pier. There's no way we could have taken it back to the vessel because the ballast changes, movements of the thing, it was all going so slow when, it's a heavy unit. And the trailer driver was missing. After the toolbox meeting, everything was done. It was 45 minutes by the time it came in position and had to be landed, but the trailer had to be moved to position. So, the various things that keep happening, and we had to flag it, and we had to say that we need to have 2 guys and we need to have to see them standing outside the trailer, not inside sitting or sleeping or whatever it is that do. So vessels equipment has to be defined for safe operating limits. It's extremely important to have the safety criteria put in place. There are some companies who have their safe working load, which is marked down 4 times of the braking stress. Some have it 3 times. I don't know, average crane, which is lifting, it's usually 1.25 times, handy max crane. But heavy lift criteria is much more than that. So these are all things which need to be understood, and operating limits have to be well understood and communicated well in time. Well, the most important aspect is to mark the start and stop time of the marine warranty surveyor. There have been, in the past projects, the starting point is the pre-arrival meeting and the briefing that happens on site. That marks the start. On another project, they said you don't need to be there for that meeting as long as you can come on a conference call, because this meeting usually happens 3 or 4 days before. If there is something that you need to contribute, come in. So the starting point of your involvement differs physically. Of course, you do a document review before, but that's very important to understand, and whether it's adequate or not for the scope of work. Sometimes you say that, look, I don't think just a telephone conference call is important. This is a heavy unit that's coming. We would like to be physically present. Might sound like you're making an extra day rate pitch there, but so be it. So schedule and appropriate site attendance, like I just mentioned, certificate approval we've talked about, and the opinion of adequacy, whether everyone understands the involvement of the marine warranty surveyors and respects it or not is important. There have been these kind of, I was there at the load port, I've seen the supercargo turns around and said, oh, the same cranes picked these up, so it's all right. Those warranty surveyors approved it. Why are you being sticky? I've moved 5,000 projects and I've only worked with one heavy lift operator. I only go to move projects, so I do this twice a month at least. So, you know, these kind of things are thrown at you. Like I said, you got to keep 2 ears open. Some of the times you have to let the information that you hear pass through the other ear. Schedules are important. The assured is an important ingredient. Assured's confidence, I think, is more important to have as a marine warranty surveyor than that of the underwriter. Because if he understands your intervention is there to eventually mitigate risk, and that's eventually going to be benefiting his project, your battle is won, really. Because you want somebody from the assured to be on your side, somebody at a level where they understand the whole thing. Breach of warranty is an important aspect. 5 minutes, I'll be finished. Last slide of this. Breach of warranty is very important to understand, because, and for you to make them understand that if I don't like something and if I don't see something that's going right, and if I flag it to you and you don't stop there, it'll be a breach of warranty. And breach of warranty could be due to deviation from an approved procedure. Like I said, sunset timing. If you've written down in your procedure that your stop timing and dropping tools is going to be the time of sunset, and if your project is still moving beyond that time, you already breach of warranty. They may continue doing it, but you have to flag it as a breach. It is your duty to inform the assured first before you inform the underwriters. Like in this case, if you would have informed the assured or his representative of lifting the crane and stopping it there, you don't need to go that far of writing it to somebody who eventually it probably will be too late. So informing the assured on site there and then is extremely important. That's the easiest way to defer a breach of warranty. And for that, like I said, you got to build up that confidence in them, and you got to become a team player, not become an outsider to them. The surveyor has to act. A marine warranty surveyor has to act. It's not about just sending emails or putting down formal notifications. He has to be talking to the people who are going to be having the controls and the decision-making authority on site. More importantly, the show-stopping authority. Those are your best friends, because you got to be talking to them and making them understand your point of view so that there will be a stop. The whole idea is to have the corrections and the course alterations, which every long voyage or every large project has. You got to correct a course. You can't say that you're going to a sea voyage. I'm a master mariner, so I keep talking about this as an example. You can't have a course that is set from destination A to destination B without having to adjust the course. And that's exactly what you do as a marine warranty surveyor. You all the time are trying to course correct because they all the time there is a tendency to deviate from the procedure in some way or the other. Not all of that deviation is risky, but to identify it and communicate with to the decision makers is extremely important. The most important thing is the last line, where there is a huge misunderstanding, at least with the people that we have dealt with in the past and present, whereby they all the time, as underwriters who appoint you, assume that you have the show-stopping authority. They say, Captain Irani, when you're there, make sure that they do stop the operations. Make sure they stop. I can't make sure they stop. I'm not part of the operation. I will flag it. It's somebody else who has to take a decision to stop the operation on. You are not a part of the operation. You are an audience. You are a witness to what's going on. If you see something that's not right, all you can do is say, oi, about to fall, about to have a disaster. If they don't want to listen and continue, yeah, run from there, especially if it falls like the one you saw. And that point cannot be better emphasized by this last slide, where open communication right from the beginning that involves the pre-arrival or the document review, communicate, toolbox meetings, communicate, certificate approvals, communicate. So it's all about that. Lead by example. Please understand, you can't be a warranty surveyor who's standing there in a posture with your hands in your pocket. That's not it. If you are not wearing your gloves and if you're not moving around the project and seeing it from all dimensions, if you're not leading with example with your body language, you've lost respect. Somebody is watching you and saying, that guy standing with his hands in his pocket, what does he think of himself? It's very important to be seen part of the team. If there's a shackle or something, although I said you're not part of the operation, there's nothing wrong in giving him a little hand and giving him a little, tug. So, what I'm saying is, how you do it is yours to decide. But I would say, being involved in it and being a friend of the operation and the operators is extremely important. Otherwise, you would know that you've done something that doesn't please them. Managing expectations is very important because a lot of people expect you to be compromising. So there might be things that you'd see, but you would say that, you know what, I'll let that go. It's not what's going to happen at the most. I mean, there might be somebody standing inside the cordoned area, which, most project covers moving, you'd have a red and white tape going in. This guy who's part of the team is standing inside there, far away, without a helmet. And you say to somebody there, you know what, that guy, he could have been standing outside, but I don't care. I'm just telling you this. So you're coming across as a compromising guy who's seen something that's not right, but it's something not going to fall on him and break his head. So you're letting it go. So managing expectations is important. Having a deep insight of things, like I said, is very important to demonstrate that you've done this before, or you know of somebody who has done it. You know that there is a guardian angel, there's a buddy system. All this is very, very important for them at site to understand that you've got a good insight in the subject. Situational awareness is very important. If you look at that rig being towed and you see that wave in front of it, you would say that, what are they doing moving it? Most rig movers, I'm a trained rig mover. I would say if I have to move a rig in that weather, I would not. But then if you look at most ocean tows, you would probably say that you would encounter some waves, but you wouldn't have a wave breaking that high in front of your rig if you're moving a box ship hull through the waters. Probably they're going too fast for the headwinds that they're probably encountering. you'd probably want to be the warranty surveyor who would say, slow down. We're expecting much larger waves than we think it is written in the weather report. So the last bit is not being a showstopper, but being a person who would stop the domino effect. You got to be the person who does the intervention. As long as you understand that you're going to be just telling them, and they know that you're going to tell them that there might be something that can be done safer, can be done. And as long as you know, is that famous cheese block diagram where you see one hole misaligned and that's you deferring the incident. As long as you are able to have the control over a decision maker to say that let's move this way, let's stop this little this way, you probably have a lot of things going wrong, but that one hole that's misaligned, you'd probably stop a disaster from happening. And that bit of being a person who would initiate the intervention would be extremely important. Thank you for your time. I hope that made a little bit of sense. For those who've done this before, how many of you all have actually done a project move that probably you saw something like this? I should have asked this as the first question, but so we're looking at 50% of them. I hope those who have lifted their hands up have found this equally useful as the ones who didn't. Mike, no questions from you. Thank you. Thank you for being a great audience. Did I keep time then? 2 minutes, right?
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. I guess I'm the only one standing between you and lunch. So 1 o'clock, that'll be fine for me. So he got a worse deal. You're going to do the graveyard shift. So yeah. I left C about 35 years ago. Joined QBE about 2 years back, roughly. And I run the marine division at QBE, and then also the Asia Pacific Marine Hull and Liability program. That background has given me a lot of insight as what is happening in the actual landscape. So I must agree that my time at sea actually did provide me for be able to be a good underwriter. So I think, for me right now is also we put a lot of emphasis on training for our own staff in terms of getting that exposure as well. So and being here kind of reignite some of the old memories in terms of the seafaring side and some of the surveyors. So good to see all of you. We'll probably catch up a bit more at lunch. Guess I got to stand here so to get on the picture. So I'm just going to, like every mariners, we like to see the worst side of things first. So I'm going to start with the worst side. What's the problem? What we are facing? And we're going to get some figures out that will probably put some flavor in terms of numbers as to what exactly is happening in the maritime world. And on the hull insurance side, some of the risk factors, seaworthiness. I know it's a tough topic. I mean, you could probably write a whole thesis on the word seaworthiness. So, and it becomes it is even more challenging now with operations, sometimes partly on the digital age as well, with information that has been transformed with broadband to the office, circumventing ship crew to a large extent to plant maintenance system. So landscape has changed tremendously. How are we going to assess risk has changed tremendously. How are we going to see which are the better risks has changed tremendously. So we're all in a learning curve, believe me. Proximate cost, I mean, the word root cause analysis, it's a technical term. In the insurance terms is proximate cost, and it's the same thing in reality. But legally, that's where we need to pin down as to whether this is an insured peril covered or not. So that's where the next stage of discussion goes on with the insured, which is not always nice, telling them that you're not going to get paid for that incident. So, but invariably, I think what we're trying to establish is the factual element behind this, and then see how we can approach that. So we'll get to the questions at the end. And what is the problem? Underwriters are bleeding. So that's a fact. hull insurance on the commercial hull and machinery, to be specific, it has not really made money for a long time. And inevitably, it's not getting better. So I think there are pockets of some underwriters do well in certain aspect of it, but so far we have seen a zero-sum game in terms of at the end of the day, with all the expenses that we need to have in terms of setting up an insurance company, with the extremely high level of regulators coming at us in terms of what we need to do, increases the expense ratios tremendously, and that reduces the margin even further. And some of it, based on international statistics, they are not doing so well either. So I think we're trying to get our partners to understand this landscape and see how we can work together. I think Marine Surveyors is an integral part of the service that we offer, and it's our partners, the way we look at it, and all our service providers are our partners, and we just need to nail this correctly in how we can work together to get these results better. Okay. Yeah, you can see the money coming out of the funnel. So it is indeed bleeding the underwriters. So we're hemorrhaging. Machinery is the biggest cost. I mean, we can allow for perils of the sea, the likes of collisions and grounding, and some degree that this could be fortuitous to some extent. But machinery is where we are really struggling in terms of getting this down, and that's where the proposition that we want to have with the surveyors in terms of recognizing what are the issues. And you can imagine with the marine landscape, the shipping landscape being what it is since 2007, 2008, that element has increased steadily but surely for the last 7 to 8 years. So it becomes more pronounced now in terms of what we need to do. And inevitably, me standing here, it's really a good opportunity. Thank you. And I think it's timely as well in terms of what we really need to do before somebody up there who controls the purse string says, it's enough, we're not going to write this class of business anymore. So that has happened from underwriter to underwriter. And that would inevitably push to a situation where you have a monopoly in the market and push the price up significantly as well, which is also not a good thing for the shipping industry as well. That would curtail innovation, that would curtail all other expenses in terms of improving. So this is a ideal situation. This is a situation that we would want to come to, but in the meantime, what can we do? So machinery is what we're trying to establish a bit more here, today's topics. I think the rest of the incidents with respect to navigation, where you have the collision, the groundings, sometimes the heavy weather damages, it's in a way, it has a lot of efforts being done in terms of crew training, masters training, through the P&I clubs and hull underwriters as well. But this is an aspect that has not seen any reduction over the years, and increasingly, it's getting more severe. 45%, if you sometimes look at some proximate cause in the grounding, which actually started from the engine being failure of the engine resulting in grounding or a collision, that figure can move up to 50. So it's 40 for some, 45 for others. At worst case scenario, it can move up to 50%. So this is the scenario here, rising out of machinery. We also want the element of due diligence expectation from the assured themselves. How more this need to be done? I think more can be done in terms of investigation whenever there's a casualty, in terms of establishing whether the owners did enough, whether they did not turn a blind eye in terms of making sure that that incident did not happen. So I think that investigation beyond the vessel needed to be done as well to establish that. And I think we as a company, and as this has been also discussed at the IIMS and the Ocean Hull Committee, which I sit as well as a committee member, how more can be done. So I think the worldwide industry is recognizing the issues. and we're trying to establish this even more. So with IIMS, what is involved, I think at some point this would become even more accreditation in terms of who gets on board to do what. So I think it's the trend. I think it's good. It's needed. I think it's timely. That was the hull premium globally. Marine per se, in terms of insurance premium, it's just a small portion when you compare to the insurance premium of the world. So this only contributes total hull, cargo, P&I, energy, come up to 30 over billion, which only maybe is a couple of percentage in terms of the global premium. So it's a small part among the larger class of business in the likes of property, but this is the oldest insurance. And we mariners have this certain pride of getting this right. And all global sea trade, you still need the vessel, still would be. You got autonomous ships on there, and maybe in the future you got fully unmanned crew vessels. So, but it's still a ship there. They need to transport all the bulk. Okay. So I think it's still become relevant. It's just how it's done that is going to change as well. The $7.5 billion US, and you can see that primarily at this point it's still out of Europe that forms the majority on the hull and machinery side. Asia is now close to 40%. This is in the 2015 figures. 2016 figure is moved up a lot. Moved up a bit in terms of share of the global pie. In reality, it's close to 50-50 between Europe and Asia Pacific. So Asia market is growing in that sense. So it would at some point be a slightly bigger play in the market in terms of ship ownership, in terms of ship management as well. So good or bad, we have to see. So, and the rest of it is just forms a very small portion in that hull premium. So this is purely hull. There's a separate statistics for cargo, which is probably 2.5 times as bigger than this, because that is the main portion. Liability and energy forms a smaller portion. Liability and energy forms a smaller portion. That's the gross loss ratios. So this Europe, Asia, underwriting years. The statistics are based. The way the statistics work is each organization in each country feeds into the International Union of Marine Insurers, who holds annual conferences and then spring meetings every year in Hamburg. And this data is how they educate the whole market as to where it is right now. Costa Concordia, of course, that was a 1 in 100-year event after Titanic, exactly 2012. So that took the marine underwriters to the peak, not seen before. So that, I mean, the P&I paid close to what, $1.5 billion for that one, for the wreck removal, and the hull and machinery was about 800 million euros. So that's a huge event from a single vessel, not even a cat event, from a single vessel. But if you take that out of the picture, assuming it's a 1 in 100-year event, hopefully, we're not sure yet. But if you look at everything else on a gross basis, you're running between 70. It will finally end the way it is. It will get worse. As the claims develop, the loss ratios get worse. So that's why you see the development years from 2013 to 2011, and then at some point it would be roughly into 3 years, 4 years, then it tends to stabilize in terms of what is the final gross loss ratio. So that's how the curve is in terms of the loss ratio. So it gets lower as it develops, it gets higher. And it tends to run between 70 to 80%, but this is on gross basis. So even if you run it 70% with the acquisition cost that you pay the intermediaries and the running cost of an insurance company, which can run between 15 to 25 to 30, some of it, you could easily see that that's already in a loss-making position already. So that's really the picture in terms of what it has been. Why we're still doing it, it's a good question. So I think inevitably the market has gone worse since the crisis in the Lehman crisis in 2008, 2009. So it's developing to a worst case scenario here. And that's why more things need to be done. Ship owners themselves are struggling inevitably, and that also is squeezing the premiums they want to pay. And with the pie not getting any bigger, in fact getting smaller, the intermediaries are pushing it to make sure that they stay in business as well. So this is multi-pronged in terms of what is happening for business to remain afloat. The insurers one side, the intermediaries in the likes of Aon, Marsh, and Willis, and the big boys of the world, and you have the insured at the end of the tail as well. So that discussion is getting to be very, very, very challenging, just so that we can make we're not looking for large margins. We're just looking for, usually the expectation for an insurer is net of cost, we still want a 5% profit. That's all that is expected actually. To pay for everything else, expense will take into, it's primarily a cost for capital to make sure that you remain profitable. And in most cases, because marine contributes only less to 5%, at best some monoline companies or very marine focused companies, contribution comes close to 10%. 90% comes from non-marine side, property drives the way. So the margins are a lot better. So that's really the solutions for companies to still do this as a part of the whole package they want to give to the clients as well. But that question, that arrangement has been questioned each day by shareholders as to, is that really what you need? So that's where we are. So the picture speaks loud that, you know, more things need to be done. Of course, this is Europe, USA. It doesn't change much, as you can see, for the rest of the world as well. We're quite close. There are certain pockets in Asia, in the likes of China, in the likes of Japan, which each contributes quite a bit in terms of global hull insurance premium. Each of those markets contributes more than $1 billion into this pie. So there's a huge portion in terms of those big markets, but they have also seen their margin eroded significantly for the last 7 to 8 years, ever since we had the crisis. I don't know, maybe we are out of the wood or we're in a trough, hopefully. So you can see here as well, I mean, apart from those years, we are still running on the 80-75 band, 70 band. So it's absolute borderline in terms of what needs to be done. Strangely though, this has not changed since 1996. This is way back. We are not changed. A lot of people would think that we're stupid doing this as well. So, like I said, it's the overall picture. Some companies do better. So I think it's more need to be done. This is the total loss in numbers. So some of it, it's quite promising in terms of the shipping aspect of things. Total losses has come down. So inevitably, I think the regulation, the quality of the surveyors, the increased governmental pressure in terms of ship management has kind of improved the conditions of the vessel. I think classification has a big part in this as well, to bring the total loss rate for anything above 500 GT on a downward trend, but not all of it is on a downward trend. So there are some aspect of it that's not really changed over the years, but mostly it's quite positive in terms of the trending, what has happened in terms of total losses. So globally, number of total losses has reduced, but the severity and the large particular average losses, which is anything not a total loss, is increasing. And for certain categories, it's getting worse. In certain age, it's not an ideal position. So we kind of price this in terms of what is the market total loss, but we are more concerned on the specific machinery losses, which is very seldom that it leads to a total loss, anything arising out of machinery. So it took us so many years from 1999 to at least see the trend down. So this is by tonnage, that's by number. So tonnage, you can see that it has not really, so the vessels are getting bigger. So we have one severity, one total loss that will tweak the figure significantly. And we had a few in the last couple of years. Some of the bulkers, it's before the SG25 IX rules as well. So that has kind of twisted the results as well. So hopefully in the future, we won't have those bulkers anymore operating in the world. So it is what it is in terms of the bulkers. Tankers tend to have a generally better trending downwards for we have seen all these years. There are some specialized vessels tends to be okay, but the bulkers is an area of the vessel that we're a bit more concerned now. What more we could do, we're not sure. We just are increasingly not writing vessels that do not conform to the latest longitudinal strengthening rules. So I think we're just trying to push out the older vessels out to the scrapyard. So whether we can do enough as an insurance industry, we don't know. There are a lot of vessels out there and they are able to get insurance cover. Total losses in terms of percentage, because the global world tonnage has also been increasing at between 2 to 3% over the years as well. So we have not really seen any significant change in terms of numbers. The actual figure in terms of tonnage, in terms of actual numbers, we see the trending downwards, but in terms of percentage of the global fleet, it's not there. 15 years on and we still have not seen it. So you got more vessels there and you got the same percentage of incidents happening. So it's interesting in terms of as the vessels get bigger, inevitably that percentage is not changing. We thought that the vessels get bigger, you get better managed, you got better crew, but it's not showing. So what is the problem? I mean, we all like to think that it's crew main tends to be the bigger problem, but it's beyond. I think it's more to this in terms of, and it could be very well be that owners are not spending enough money on spare parts and everything else. So we definitely are pushing for office audits on all fleets that we ride. So I think whether that is enough, I think that's the real question. Office audits, it becomes quite significant in the current day and age. But the quality of the office audits, it's where we want to see significant improvement in some aspects of it. It is just, everything now is digital. Everything is kept on in computers. If you go walk into any ship management company right now, everything is digital. And you have to go through, you sit down in front of the computer and you got to go through item by item and see what exactly they're doing. So on paper, everything looks amazing, but when we start drilling down to item, some of it don't even have planned maintenance system for all the items on board. That's strange, but that's the reality. How far are we going to go into the office audit? How deep we're going to go? How much more we're going to spend? I think we need that. We need your eyes, your expertise. Trend not so good. Bulkers generally, so you can see the larger ones, the older ones tends to be where some of the problem is. This is anything above 10,000 deadweight. So that's earlier years against younger age. So bulkers, like I said, this could be partly due to the fact that the class rules has changed for the newer vessels. So definitely an improvement in terms of the strength for the newer bulkers. Anything less than 10 years, it's still much stronger. We still have Cape-size bulkers out there. We had a recent one off Brazil that went down. So, and it was carrying iron ore and it was a 20-year-old bulker. So it's still there. Tanker, I was quite surprised with this figure. So I thought tankers should have a better result with all the inspection happening around the world. You have the IIMS inspection, you got all the tanker inspections that's happening around the world. But we still have older tankers that tends to be a bit smaller ones and tends to be a bit more coastal, out of the eyes of the oil majors, but not NOCs. So NOCs are not doing enough. So it tends to be in certain part of the world. So your guess is as good as mine which part of the world it is. So serious and total losses. This is what we look after. Total loss and the serious losses. The serious losses is really an upward trend, and this is where, from a financial perspective, this is what we are concerned with, and it's getting worse. The machinery, the spare parts, you got few manufacturers right now, so the spare parts cost has not come down at all. Insurance has gone up. So mathematically, you could see that the increase is it's a bit worrying. As a percentage of the global fleet as well, this is anything above 500 GT. The trending for the last 3 years has also been it's on an upward trend as well. So this directly related to the shipping landscape right now with ship owners. I think it's a big part into this, but the fact still remains that the trending is upwards. This is the statistics from C4. C4 is a Norwegian insurance committee. So the likes of GARD and the likes of Norwegian Hull Club. So their contribution to the worldwide statistics is about 25%. So they have control over 25% as a leader for providing hull and machinery. So this is your statistics. In the International Union of Marine Insurers, we don't have statistics that granular in terms of type of claims. That is not fed into the system. So the closest we can get to an international profile of the type of machinery claims or type of claims that you see, this is a good representation. It is about 25% of the global fleet for larger tonnage, anything above 1,000 GT. So I think this is a good representation. In discussions with each member, each insurers providing the hull and machinery services, I think this is very accurate. I mean, it could move up and down 5%, 10%, but it's generally a good figure to work on. So 2016 figures based on their C4 statistics, it was close to 40% machinery claim. Of course, you got a fire and explosion, you got a collision, you got a contact and a grounding, ice damage, the heavy weather, and the others as well. So you can see machinery, it's a big part in this. It's 7.6 billion hull machinery premium. We're running at 75%. Do the maths, you know, how much insurance premium claims that we are paying every year, and 40% of that is coming from machinery. So that's a huge part there. Fires and explosion has also been creeping up in the last few years. I'll come to that later on. So that's the statistics. So it's been quite consistent in terms of the machinery claims. So it is it's a trend. We're not sure whether what more we could do. We're having more discussion with engine manufacturers as the union in terms of what we can do, and but I think they are more keen to sell the engines to anybody, and you know, they're not so forthcoming in terms of getting some of the information in terms of sharing as well. So you could, on the marine engine side, you can probably look at 5 or 6 of them who controls the world engine manufacturer sector. So there you are. Machinery. It's where I think we want more help from the marine surveying fraternity. I think this is something, because if we can knock 10% out of this, that's a tremendous saving for us in terms of actual dollar value. So that's where, and this is a breakdown in terms of cost. And you can see frequency-wise, it's close to 40, and on cost basis, it's around 42 plus really. So like I said, some companies, it has gone up, even up to 50. So between 40 and 50 as per cost is coming from machinery claims. So the rest are quite evenly spread out in terms of losses. And that's what insurers want to pay for fortuitous losses. I mean, if it's an error in navigation, if the crews are well trained, and that happens at sea, that's why we are there for. What frustrates sometimes is we're paying for lack of maintenance. That's where the challenge is, and that's why we want the eyes of the surveyors to pick this up in terms of how to advise us what more we could do. Machinery is still a big concern. So like I said, it's the numbers there, the volume is there. So, but the peak risk you can see is coming from the fire losses. We had, in the last 5 to 6 years, we've been seeing a lot of fire losses. And it's absolute challenge. Fire is a named peril. But based on proximate cause, one still has to establish what is the proximate cause. Could start from the engine on a crankcase explosion and there's a fire. So they started at the engine. But 80% of the time, we are not able to determine what is the proximate cause of the fire. So that still remains a challenge. So with this increase and an inability for us to actually ascertain, even with forensics help, to pin down exactly what has happened, has put some degree of pressure. But it's a named peril, so those familiar with the institute clauses, so as long as a named peril, policy need to respond. It's the burden shift to us to prove otherwise. So that's where the challenge is, and fire is a named peril. So we struggle as insurers, as claims practitioners, we struggle to see what is the proximate cause. And a lot of it could be wear and tear because the insulation has worn down, which is an exclusion under the cover, but difficult to pin down, difficult to challenge, difficult to ascertain. So it's a concern. It's in the last 5 years we are seeing this, and even to the pleasure craft industry, there was a market loss of close to $25 million on a large yacht that went down in the Pacific, and it was due to fire. We're still trying to figure out what happened, because machinery is still a big concern, but so is fire. But I think let's do machinery. Highest engine claim frequency is on the car, ro-ros, cargo, container, fishing vessels. So that's where, statistically, that's where the bulk of it. If, like I said, if we drill down as per proximate cause on some of the sectors, then we see LNG, supply offshore vessels, and fishing vessels that move up to exceeding 50%. So engine claim frequency and cost depend on the vessel type and trade. Some of the figures here are overrepresented because certain class of vessels tends to be predominantly there, so the figures might just change. But in reality, it's the type of, and fishing vessels have a high propensity for such claims. The nature of the way they operate, the trade is slightly different compared to a cable ship where they bring the vessels out 4 months in a year. So that aspect of it is much lower. LNG, LPGs, right now, mostly on spot charters right now. What we was previously in the life, we was all on long-term charters. So that has changed in terms of machinery, which doesn't only stop at main engines and auxiliary engines. My numbers are due to technical failure, but technical failure due to crew negligence tends to be the major part of that, because they didn't clean the filter, they are not observing the loop oil pressure sufficiently, even when the engine need to go on slow down when the loop oil pressure reduces as well. So somebody overrides it. So there's always this element of crew getting involved in some form. Pure technical failure, meaning an inherent fault in the machinery, contributes less than 5%. So it's all related to people, and that's really, and we all been there in that space, so we know the adverse conditions that they work in. So a lot of it has to do with the owners themselves as to how they can mitigate this and give them the right tools. So definitely a room for improvement. So just to touch this briefly just now. So, we got 7.6 billion. If the average loss ratio is 85%, average claim 6.5 billion based on 85%, machinery 40% is 2.6 billion is what the industry is spending. That's huge. That could be even bigger than some of the countries' GDP. Is what we are paying for. So main engine average 1.5 million. So strange. We are feeding the engine makers. So I don't know. Maybe that's the reason why they don't want to talk to us so often. So that, yeah, briefly, just to give you an idea what exactly we are up against. So this is the insurance conditions that's most prevailing in the world. That's the Institute Time Hull clauses. And this 1983 clause called 280. It's the most widely used cover in the shipping community. 85% globally. That's the wording being used. It's 1983, so it's as old as us, I guess, some of it. So the fact is why the owners don't want to use, and there's been so many revisions since then, but the owners refuse to use the newer wording because there is more burden on them. So this is still widely used, unfortunately. All efforts to change this has not been very successful, so commercially. So this is the Inchmeric site. So 6.11 is all the perils. So you have the fire, you got the explosion, you got the rest of it. So the perils of the sea and everything else. So this is the second part where there is covered for negligence of the crew, master and the officers and the crew. We do cover negligence.
Can I just ask you a question there? The 80s, if there was a crew negligence incident, then there was a 10% discount on the claim, right, or removal from the claim.
Yeah.
But that was done away with, wasn't it?
You
can't do that anymore.
We can. It goes by contract by contract. Some of it we have it. So in terms of the claims handling, that we have that if that's due to crew negligence, they need to contribute a portion of that. If that's the thing. So, but I must admit that it's not many that we have such contracts. So there are with some owners that we have able to impose this. So it range from 10%. I think at best we have seen is 20%. So in that respect.
Per incident of crew negligence.
Yes. So, but what we want as insurers is the last part there. Provided that's a provisional year based on this 6.21 to 6.25 has not resulted from one of due diligence on the part of the ship owner. That's where we are struggling. That's where not enough is been challenged in terms of want of due diligence. So it's contractually you have ISM now. Everything has to be documented. So in the event that you have a situation where, let's say the pumps were on standby and they didn't even have it replaced, and then the fact that the one failed and the duplicate was not there to be even put on service. Now, if that has been part of the ISM documentation being provided to the ship owner, now that is really challenges the want of due diligence on the part. So that's where we need to go.
Can I just ask one more question there? If you don't mind. Going back to the machinery, you said the machinery claims are by far the largest proportion. And that seems to fly in the face of the fact that the engine manufacturers say that engines are becoming more reliable all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it also seems to fly in the face of the P&I figures where they say that 95 or 85% of the claims are due to human error, right? Mm. So there seems to be some sort of external influence here, not just crew negligence, right? Okay. Do you do an analysis of the figures involved with engine failures relating to bunker disputes?
We have. That is also, there is also an element coming from poor quality fuel.
Yes.
And there has been cases where we were able to go after the charters in terms of that. So
What sort of proportions though?
not enough,
Not big.
not big. So that, I think we are in a current day and age where specifications for fuel is quite stringent, and suppliers tends to be bigger operators now than what it was 10, 15 years ago. You got the majors involved, you got big national companies. So the supply tends to be quite within specs on most cases. You have the odd ones out, but that percentage is getting smaller.
So if you had a bunker claim, a bunker dispute, and the engine damage was attributed to the fact there's poor quality fuel, and the chief engineer hadn't done his job in monitoring the bunkers, like he'd taken the samples from the barge, is that a crew negligence case as far as the...
Well, that's why the owners will allude to, right? But if it's supplied wrongly, of course, we have subrogated rights to go after these charters in terms of this thing. So whether we do it or the owners do it, I think that's the question. That's how we're going to do this. So if there is system on board, I know some vessels do not have enough bunker tanks to have this full redundancy in terms of before you test everything. Every vessels now, I mean, I don't know, when I was there 35 years ago as a chief engineer, we had to test the bunkers before we consume. That was the government. I'm sure it is still the practice in most of the cases.
That's what happens when the bunkers are taken on board the ship. The analysis is sent ashore immediately, and the vessel is not allowed to use that fuel until the analysis is confirmed correctly.
Yeah. So if that were to happen with that, then so no chief engineer will take the responsibility that we won't use it until he gets back. But office might take that choice. If you say, this supplier has been a fantastic supplier, we're quite confident, we can't detour now, especially if you have to go to another, if there's a detour somewhere else, the pressure comes from the office. Now, that's clearly a question on one of due diligence. So that's where we're trying to get that message across in terms of what more we need to do. So absolutely, as far as I remember, and a lot of my peers are around in the market, when I speak to all the superintendent and the fleet directors, they say, no, this is the practice. But in reality, that's the small part where that is breached, very small part. So it's primarily, engine manufacturers has been clearly saying there's nothing wrong with the product. It's all the crew that's not doing well. So that's their mother statement. So to prove against that is not always easy. It takes years to prove that everything is done. It gets better with brand new vessels, but it's lost anything over than a year or 2-year-old vessels. It's just an absolute challenge to go. We had a case many years ago as an industry, but that was because of the casting in an engine block that affected 6 to 8 VLCC. This is in the 90s, which eventually went after the engine manufacturers. There's only 2 very large slow-speed engine manufacturers, so you know who they are. So, but the fact is, it took us a tremendous amount, but there was a clear cut because it transcended across multiple vessels from the same manufacturer, from a same location. So that was an easier one to me. Operational issues becomes much more challenging, but it just an eye surveys that to look out for what's wrong. I recently went on board a vessel and they were using OEM parts, was the wrong parts altogether. And the guy took it off and then they replaced it with the same one. And then one look at it, you know, hey, there's something wrong with the piston because it's not the right one as to what was the original one. So I think that still happens. So that's where I think we need to do more as partners in how to bring this down, how to question the one of due diligence. Legally, it's not an easy part of it, but if you really look at the warranties under the Marine Insurance Act, this has gone through some changes, but the warranties has not, is implied. So most policies work on time clauses, meaning we insure the vessels for a 12-month period. That's usually the case. Slightly more on certain circumstances as well. We do cover them for a single voyage if they are not supposed to be operating in that trading area. So if you're taking delivery of a vessel out of Japan, for operation into Singapore or Malaysia, that single voyage becomes on a voyage cover, and then it goes on a 12-month time cover. So the conditions differs in terms of what is implied. So seaworthiness is always implied, but what is the recovery? That's really the question. For every voyage policies, it is implied at the commencement of the voyage that the vessel must be seaworthy. This is a very big statement. If you really dig hard, you can always find something. We all know, we've been in that fraternity. So the question now comes to the time policies. The time policies is also implied at some point that if that unseaworthiness was the direct causation to that incident, to the damage, with the privity of the owners, so then insurers base this cover becomes null and void. So the question is the privity of the owners. So that's where we're trying to establish. Sometimes we have seen cases where the master or a chief engineer was totally incompetent. It's unbelievable what they did on board, but the fact still remains that we know he's incompetent. We speak to everybody else and they all agree that he's incompetent, but now how you link back to the privity of the owners, that's where if the ISM documents allow appraisal of the crew on a regular basis. A lot of companies do that, and that's already been there and they still put him on board. Now that's question. Either you turn a blind eye is as good as with the privity of the owner. So that's really the question. So this is where we are trying to get more information. Not to go and deny claim. Please don't get me wrong. So it's just matter of trying to do the right thing for an industry and hopefully better owners. There are a lot of good owners, excellent owners who are very transparent, who go deep analysis into root cause analysis and keep us advised of what is being done. And we don't want them to be lumped up in the non-good, so-called not so good operators in the world that we still have. So to tarnish the image. So I think it's just trying to get everybody to do the right thing. The banks have bigger power. Next comes the insurers in terms of how we can do this. Not as good as the regulators or the majors, but I think as a combined entity, we are trying to do more, trying to weed out some of this poor practice. So just to write up a bit more, I think it's quite clear. So in a time policy, there is no implied warranty that the ship shall be seaworthy at any stage of the event, but where with the privity of the assured, the ship is sent in an unseaworthy state, the insurer is not liable for any loss attributable to the unseaworthiness. So if there's a master who was on watch and he was incompetent, and there was a grounding that resulted directly because of incompetent and with the privity of the owners now, that we cannot accept. Okay. Like I said, root cause analysis, it's a very technical term, and it's in line with, from a legal perspective, we use the word proximate cause. So that determines, and it's a legal principle in English law, clearly defined, clearly stated from legal precedents as to what are the possible scenarios that you could have, and you can come to this. But what he says is defined as the active and efficient cause. Okay, it's an English definition. So that sets in motion a train of events which brings about a result without the intervention of any force, started and working actively from a new and independent source. So okay, it's a tough one. So in reality is one has to establish the proximate cause. So in the case of a fire, the proximate cause could be an explosion, a crankcase explosion, or even a poor insulation at some point that causes the insulation to fail and sparking to occur. So this could be possible. And of course, in a tank explosion, it is because the inert gas was not in the primary level, and you got the environment conducive for an explosion as well. So the root cause or the proximate cause, it's the most critical element for us as an insurer to establish whether this is a peril covered. So we'll go back to the root cause or the proximate cause, the terminology that's been used in insurance. So Oops. Okay, just give me a few more minutes and we'll be there. So some of the issues that we have seen over the period is crew training and competency. It's still a challenge. And some companies has done a fantastic job. The level of expertise, the crew training, they really do spend, and it's at the highest level one can get at. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are some which is still lacking in terms of what more we could do. And it's through us sometimes that we insist on the office audits, the crew training, we want to do more. We're trying to push up the level of expertise as much as we can from a financial perspective. Otherwise, we'll hit them with a very high self-retention portion of their claims as well. So I think this is one way to push. It's a multifaceted approach that we need to do. And from our end, we're just doing one side of things, how to get this whole industry to be in a better shape. Maintenance, it's the key factor. It's more can be done. Talk about fuel treatment as well, some of it. Loop oil management is also tends to be one of the bigger issues that we are seeing from the day-to-day files that we are looking at this point. So maintenance, primarily, I mean, notwithstanding that we are paying for the bulk of the new engines there, but we are paying a lot for the engines maintenance. And owners are really turning a blind eye. Not all of them, some of them. Human factors, the safety culture, the reduced manning. I was in the owner's office recently, and the owner said, I got a dispensation from the manning, from the flag state, that I can do with one less crew, from a minimum manning. Can you imagine? We already had minimum manning, you got dispensation to have one less crew and one less navigating officer. So I said, listen, I mean, that's your this thing, but as far as insurance is concerned, I don't think that's adequate, and we're not going to allow for this. So the worrying trend, if everybody start to have reduced manning, I mean, if it's fully digitalized autonomous ship, then it's fine. But it's not there yet. It's still fully manned engine room, and we still have reduced manning. And notwithstanding, this was a tanker and doing short voyages. You just can't comply with all the rest time IT requirements. Training, skills, and experience. I don't know about you guys, but the quality there is dropping. I think the institutions are probably part to blame for this. I don't know, or maybe because there's something better out there. I mean, I guess in our day and age, it was still lucrative to go out to sea, but nowadays you talk to a young person, you're just not interested to go to sea. So it's sad. Will we ever get to the airline standard? So commercial pressures, as we spare parts, workshops, owners are increasingly increasing the time between overhauls of engine key components, non-OEM parts, including service engineers as well. So these are some of the other factors that's contributing to it. So what we wish for is really to establish what sets this owner apart, or upwards or downwards, understand the root cause, where is it all stemming from? Because if we don't understand the root cause, we would be just coming back to this same page again and again and again and again. We just need to establish the root cause, and we share with different owners that this has happened, not naming companies, and tell them to listen, this has happened, and what have you done on your fleet? If you feel that this is the same category of fleets that we run, they're operating. So that's one aspect that we do quite regularly. So cost should be looked at in a way of fixing the problem. So that's really how we're trying to get the message across. And data, surveyors are guys on the ground. They speak to the crew. They have this instinct straight away. They know what's happening, what's lacking. So that information, it's $1 million information for us. We need that. And solution, that's tremendous. We can always send somebody to do an office audit and all that, but you don't pick up everything. you probably are lucky if you pick up 50% of what's real issues are there. Talking to the officers, the senior officers, even to the crew, it's a lot out there. You can see all the signs long before it happens. Like I said, cost, frequency, and you're getting more complex vessels nowadays. So vessels are getting more complex. And I mean, 10 years from now, it's all be dual fired. Every vessels, it's all LNGs and diesel. I don't think we'll ever use diesels anymore. So it's getting far more complex in terms of the cargo we're carrying, the type of size we're carrying now, and the engines that is going to be used. A crew qualified to deal with all this. Chief engineer probably was trained 30 years ago. Is he fit to be still a chief engineer on board without the upgrading? There's no upgrading for chief engineers on board. Absolutely nothing. Is the engine manufacturers giving enough? No, they are not. Questions? Sorry guys for dragging this 10 minutes late. I'll join you for lunch, so if there's anything, feel free.
We've got a panel discussion at the end of the day, half an hour. So if you've got questions you want to raise at the end of the day, all of the speakers will be on the panel. So fire questions directly at them.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.